Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having me here at DevOps Days Amsterdam. Really privileged to be kicking off this business track. As you've just heard, I'm here to talk about moving from project to product. My name is Ed. I am a product manager for DevOps Group in the UK. And just before we dive into it, what can we expect in the next 20 minutes? So I think to kick things off, let's look at where it all went wrong. I think it's fair to say we're not great at delivering IT initiatives in organizations at the moment. So let's see, how did we get where we are? Secondly, let's look at where we go from here. And then finally, what are some guiding principles that are going to help us as we move from project to product? And finally, these are somewhat strange times. I'm working from home. If we do get interrupted by my 4-year-old Springer Spaniel, then please accept my apologies. Now, unfortunately, to kick this talk off, I think we need to start with a fairly unpleasant truth that for lots of organizations, IT is broken. It's simply not fit for purpose. And it's not a popular opinion among tech audiences, but I think if we're honest with ourselves, we would accept that we've been struggling to deliver IT initiatives in our organizations for years now. Now, this isn't because we don't have brilliant people, and it's not because we don't have people who genuinely come to work and do their best. But I think it's down to the fact that the way that we try to deliver IT initiatives within our organizations is fundamentally broken. And I think one of the things that underpins that, and before we dive into all of those details, there's something, the elephant in the room, if you like, that we need to call out. And that's the fact that the way that we have been referring to the business for years and years and years is wrong. This isn't the business. This is our business. And if we're going to overcome the problems that we're seeing in organizations, we need to find a way for these two sides of the same coin to come together and to establish some shared goals. Now, don't get me wrong. This feels like I'm bashing IT a little bit here. The fault, I don't believe, lies in IT. For years, IT departments have been treated as a cost center. We've been tasked with driving down costs, but the level of productivity that's been expected from us and our teams has been going up and up and up. And then to compound things further, lots of organizations have moved to functional outsourcing of parts of their IT organization. And it's lots of this, functionally aligned teams that I think is having a very real impact on the way that we deliver, or more the way we fail to deliver technology projects in our organizations. So I want to start with just a little bit of an example and just look at how we typically would deliver, what might be a fairly large software-focused IT initiative within a traditional organization. And everything starts with an idea. And for me, this is where things start to go wrong, because in most organizations, this idea is it's a big initiative. It's something fairly sizable that executives and sponsors can get behind. This isn't the place for small customer focused experiments. And what generally happens is we start on this treadmill of handovers as we try and deliver this change. We involve our project management office to try and understand how we're going to schedule this piece of work in, how we're going to size it. Usually we'll get a BA team involved to start drilling down into the detail of what that looks like. We'll get some technical input from teams of architects. And then usually at some time around now, we might start an actual, what we would term sort of the dev process itself. And again, lots of teams involved, lots of people involved. And these teams are fairly kind of fluid and amorphous during this process, but we're going to get some UX people involved, some front-end devs involved, probably some back-end devs. And then inevitably we'll pass this work over to a team of DBAs. And in all but kind of the smallest organizations, there's some integrations that need to happen. How do we make this thing that we're working really hard to deliver work with everything else that we have in our organization? And at this point, we can usually start to see what this thing that we're building looks like. And that's when this person tends to put in an appearance. So this is our helicopter exec, our lead sponsor, who can now see how this initiative's going. And inevitably at this point, they drop a whole load of work into the teams that, as far as they're concerned, are already done on this initiative and are moving on to other work. This has the impact of just kind of rolling everything back. We consume the work and then we begin this process again of handing half-finished work over to different teams. We go back to our back-end devs, to our DBAs, back to the integrations teams. And then things get really thorny in a lot of organizations as it comes to testing, and we find that we're not even just passing our testing off to a different team. We're passing this off to a completely different organization that has completely different goals to us and certainly isn't aligned to what our customers care about. And then usually as we start to get closer to putting this thing into production, some performance testing happens. We might start to bring in a service delivery team to work out how we deploy this thing that we've spent many, many months building And then last, and by far no means least, we hand this over to our operations team to actually run this thing in production. So the net result of this, many months have passed. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars developing this solution, and we still don't know whether this is something that our customers even care about and will use, or indeed whether the entire market that we're serving has moved on. And surely there has to be a better way to deliver these large IT initiatives. So the reality is, it's not just people like me standing on stages at conferences who say there has to be a better way. This is actually something that our organizations know. If we look at recent reports from McKinsey, only 8% of companies believe their organizations are going to survive without changing the way that they actually work today. So facing the fact that we have to change, it's probably good now just to reflect and try and understand, where did it all go wrong? And the reason for exploring where we lost our way, I think, is important, because unless we understand those values, beliefs, and behaviors that kind of got us where we are, there's little chance that we're not going to end up repeating those mistakes. And when you boil it down, for me, there's two fundamental problems that are facing IT teams. They are the way that we manage people, and they are the way that we deliver work. And they're very closely related. So if we look at the way that we manage our people, to start with, I think a lot of this stems back to the turn of the 20th century, to the principles of scientific management. And this was the first time that we saw anything that we would categorize as management theory. And generally speaking, in most organizations and most facets of organizations, we've kind of moved on from this. But I think if you look at IT organizations in particular, there's some fairly damaging strands that take us back to this idea of scientific management. So at the heart of scientific management, or Taylorism as it's also known, is this idea that we divide our workforce into two. We have managers and workers. We have those who plan, and we have those who do. But scientific management involved in an environment where work was repeatable, and therefore it benefited greatly from elements of standardization. But if you think about what we do in IT and what it takes to deliver modern IT initiatives, this idea of standardization is actually fairly ill-suited to what we're doing. If we deem that there's one best way to do every job, we ignore the fact that most of what we do is novel and unique in IT, because anything that isn't novel and unique is easily repeatable. We have patterns and practices that allow us to do things we've done before very easily. We have, infrastructure as code, we have shared libraries, we have, all of these things that make it easy for us to do the mundane, and we should be focusing on the unique. So what happens is, if you follow this model through, you end up with an organization and an environment where we're managing and monitoring employees in such a way that we want them to focus on executing tasks with maximum efficiency. And the net result of this is an organization and a system that values and rewards efficiency over effectiveness. So we have a management approach that epitomizes the idea of local optimization. We focus on ensuring the maximum efficiency of one team or one function without ever understanding the impact that has on our wider system, and more importantly, whether we're delivering any value to our customers. We're doing the right thing. We are doing the thing right, but we are not necessarily doing the right thing. So how do we know that this is a problem in our organization? And I think there's lots of clues that you can kind of look for. But for me, this is my absolute favorite. If you're in your organization and you hear people talking about things like this, we need to keep our people busy, it's seen as more important that individuals and potentially small teams are working efficiently than the whole system is effectively delivering value. So if we move on from the way that we manage our people, the way that we deliver IT projects in most, IT initiatives rather, in most organizations, it tends to be based around projects. Before we dive into the specific problems with this, in most organizations, don't forget, projects are big. And this is something that we'll keep coming back to throughout the remainder of this session. So most organizations decide that we're going to build something huge, and then we go ahead and we make all of our key decisions up front. This is the point at which we know least about what it is that we're going to do, but we front load all of those key decisions at this point. Now, there's lots of people out there, and I have been that person, that are going to argue that the structure of a project will mitigate risks of delivering IT for an organization. I don't agree. I think the reality is that projects just give you a way to manage all of the risks that you just created by making all of your decisions up front. So moving on to the funding model that we have that supports projects, and it is completely lacking in flexibility in most organizations. So we ask people to decide a year or more in advance what they're going to build, how long it's going to take, and what it's going to cost. And then typically we hold them to that. And this gets worse because in a lot of organizations, we even penalize people who manage to do the thing that they've committed to do without spending all of their budget. Moving from funding to teams, projects have a huge impact on teams, and teams is probably in quotes in this model because teams are very amorphous within a project, and you have people moved very much to the work. And these people are delivering, very specific projects, and it forces us into a short-term mindset. So teams are challenged in a project environment of delivering against the agreed scope of work and getting it into production. These people are not typically responsible for any operability of these applications. They're not responsible for long-term maintenance. And because the thing that we are measuring and the thing that we're telling people that we value is getting done and into production, this is what they focus on. And we leave all of the operability requirements and the maintenance to one side as soon as we come under any pressure. And that's not to say that these are bad people and that we should be chastising our engineers for doing this. This is human nature. They're simply responding to the thing that we as an organization are telling them is important. And finally, rarely, if ever, when we're delivering projects, do we actually think about the actual value that we're delivering. So a project tends to be considered successful if they deliver these fairly arbitrary measures of cost, time, and scope. And there's two significant problems with measuring success in this way. The first thing, if all I care about is cost, scope, and time as a project manager, and I was a project manager for quite a long time, the only thing I can flex on is quality. I can't move any of those other things to help me, get into production. And secondly, none of the things that we say we care about, cost, scope, time, actually speak to customer value. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that projects simply do not focus on or even care about customers. And throughout this talk, I'm talking about customers and users. We can use them interchangeably. It's ultimately the person who should value from the thing that we're building or the service that we're delivering. So a little bit like with when we talked about the way that we manage our people, what are some of the things that you can hear in an organization that should get you thinking that we're probably not doing things quite right here? This is one of my favorites, and you've probably heard variations on this a lot. Don't worry about whether it works. What does the spec say? By works here, I mean, does it work for the user? Does it allow the user or the customer to do the thing they want to do? Typically we're so divorced from our customers, or we're just not rewarded on whether they can use the thing we're building. It doesn't come into our conversations. So this is a fairly pessimistic view of the world, but I think it's important to kind of understand how we got where we are. But where do we go from here? So one of the criticisms that I've had as a product manager when I've been talking to organizations about a product-centric approach is that it's not particularly easy for people who don't work in a traditional software product to understand how this is relatable for them. Infrastructure and operations teams are typically going to go back and go, well, we don't build products, so this doesn't apply to us, so we need to look for something else. And that's why I think it's important that we're a little bit more nuanced in our definition of what we mean by a product. So our move from project to product is a move to products, platforms, and services. And there's significant overlap in these ways of delivering value. But there is one overarching principle between all three of these things. And that's that they're all aligned to our customers and to the needs of our customers or the needs of our users. And this model is often referred to as product modes to make it a little bit more all-encompassing. And it provides us with this new operating model, which is much more focused on effectiveness and not efficiency. And there's three core characteristics at the heart of this idea of products, platforms, and services. For me, they are customer-centric. Our customers, our end users are absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to do. We execute and we build our organization around cross-functional teams because we have to be relentless in our attempt to eliminate handoffs between teams. And then finally, they're all enabled by technology. You'll hear lots of people talking about platforms and pipelines, and the key technologies that really kind of accelerate this model of cloud, CI/CD, infrastructure as code, automated testing. Without these things, this model becomes much, much harder to execute. So that's all well and good. What does it kind of look like in an organization? Let's see if we can maybe bring this to life a little bit. So lots of organizations have some form of software development capability, and that very easily slots into the traditional product box. But alongside products, we have a number of services in lots of organizations. Now, services deliver things that our customers care about, but they're intangible, okay? So it's not a physical device. It's things like collaboration services, workplace services. They're things that customers value. The main difference for me, and a very simplified view of the world between products and services, is product is passive in its ability to deliver value to people. Once we've deployed it, people consume that product as much as they need and they get value from it. Services tend to need somebody to do something to unlock that value. But essentially, they are both customer and user-centric ways of delivering value to our customers. And they have another similarity, and that is that they need to be successful to be underpinned by platform teams. Now, platform teams provide services into these product and service teams, and therefore, by definition, their customers and users are these teams. But one of the things that we need to make sure we do when we start talking about platform teams is we have to understand this really important concept, that if we're to avoid handoffs between teams, we have to be in a position where we're delivering platforms as a service. And we're using a lot of that automation that we talked about earlier to enable these teams to consume those services. And they can be all sorts of things. A continuous delivery platform is a great example, but there are, literally hundreds of things that can be provided as a service into an organization. The idea here would be that if we take out product development division, as it may be in the model, with a new team spun up in it, working on a new initiative, looking to deploy a new product, they simply consume the CI/CD pipeline as a service. They don't have to build and run that service themselves, and also they're not waiting on tickets. They're not blocked, in order to deliver that thing into production. Now, a lot of models that talk about product alignment stop here. There are a couple of nuances to it, and there's a couple of things that I think are worth calling out. Certainly in large organizations, there's going to be a need for what we would call an enablement service. So, a governance function, an architecture function. What's different in this model is that enablement services don't do the actual work. The work is still done in the product, service, and platform teams. These enablement services are providing advice, support, and guidance. And while lots of organizations move towards a you build it, you run it model, a lot of times we see organizations are needing some form of kind of service desk across the front end to interact with customers, and then some sort of SRE or triage team, which may dip into these other products and services teams, maybe standalone, but also provides that security, if you like, that things can't drop between the gaps, that every customer facing incident has an owner until the point that it's resolved. And then finally, in this model, there's this idea of what's called inner source or corporate open source. So this idea that we're building on the sharing of the comms model, and that actually all of the work that's being done in these teams, because we're using a lot of automation and services that are defined by code, is shared between the teams. So if our product development team, for example, needs a new feature within the CI/CD platform, they can actually collaborate with the platform team themselves and help to deliver that service. So this is a somewhat abstract model of how this might work. Let's look at how that plays out. If we think back to the software delivery flow that we talked about at the top, lots and lots of handovers. In a product, platform, and service, that model is much, much simpler. Now, everything still starts with an idea, but it's not starting with an initiative. Okay, what we're starting with is much smaller. It may be part of something broader, some sort of North Star that we're aiming towards, but it's in and of itself, it's much more almost experimental thing that we want to prove. That idea sits on a backlog within our product team. So this is a prioritized backlog that includes feature requests, but it also includes those operability requirements. It includes maintenance and bug fix and all of those things. And our product owner, along with our team, is able to prioritize those things, make a value judgment on what the best thing to deliver next is, and then collectively the team can make a commitment to deliver that. Because we now have a cross-functional team, the team has everything that they need, drawing on the support of those platform teams, to deliver in a very short amount of time the thing that they have just committed to. And super quick, we can get that thing into the hands of our customer before the market has changed, and in time to allow us to understand whether that's the thing that our customer wanted. Now, it's important to see that nowhere on this diagram will you see a crystal ball. Okay, there's nothing in this model that says that idea coming in on the left-hand side of this diagram is going to be the right thing to build. But what we have that changes this significantly is we have a product owner and a team who are incredibly close to our customer. They can ask questions of the customers and the users about what it is they like and they value. And significantly, this all happens really, really quickly. So we're not waiting 12 or 18 months to find out whether we're building the right thing. In a really high-performing team, this can be happening in days or weeks, typically 2 to 4 weeks into the hands of our customers. So I think it's fair to say this feels like a better way of delivering IT change and IT initiatives within our organizations. So, as I think I said at the top of the talk, I'm not going to talk about how we move from one model to another, because I think that's incredibly complex and nuanced within an organization. What I think you need to think about if you're going on this journey are 5 guiding principles. And I think if you get these 5 things right, irrespective of the methodology you use to change, you're going to be heading in the right direction. The first thing that you need to think about is how do we move from large batches to small? And for me, this is the principle of change that just keeps on giving. So as we move to smaller releases, because our releases are smaller, we increase our release cadence in proportion to those. Because we really increase our release cadence, we're doing this thing more often. We start to make what used to be complex and difficult mundane simply through practice. Also, we're going to hit a natural threshold on how frequently we can deploy, and we're going to need to go quicker. So this pushes us to automate our deployments, which ultimately makes them a lot safer. And then finally, as soon as you reduce your batch size and increase your release cadence, you avoid what we call the release frenzy. So if you're only releasing every 6 or 12 months in an organization, everybody knows that release is coming and they need to get their change into it. Because if they don't, they know that it's going to be 6 or 12 months. So you end up with these exponentially larger and more complex releases. So key starting point is work out how you can reduce your batch size. Once you start to reduce your batch size, we then get to change what we focus on, because we're now delivering more frequently. So we change our focus from are we delivering our plan to simply are we delighting our customers, and are we getting feedback from our customers and our users that says we're building the right thing. We move on from focus now, so scope. So for anybody who's been involved in writing those hundreds of pages of requirements documents, we can start to move away from that. We still have a roadmap, we still have a guiding principle that tells us where we're trying to get to. But actually the things that we are working on a sprint to sprint and a quarter to quarter basis tend to be based on feeding from our feedback from our users and from our customers. And then fourth on this list, funding. This changes significantly as we move towards these cross-functional teams that are available to focus on delivering a particular service a particular customer need. So instead of big project funding where it's all very big and we're funding a particular solution, we actually move to this model now where we're funding the team, and we're trusting the team to deliver along the value stream that we've identified within our organization. And then fifth of my 5, the big change that you see in organizations that are going from project to product, and the big driver that lots of organizations have is, in a project world, our speed to market is generally determined by how big the thing is that we're building, because no manner of careful project management will get you away from the fact that a certain number of engineers can only deliver a certain amount of change in a set time. So because everything's big, it just takes as long as it does for us to get that to market. And actually what we move from here is this idea that it takes as long as it takes to actually we can get to market as fast as possible by delivering the smallest thing that we think is going to deliver value to our customers. So the question is, how do we know if we're going in the right direction? Those are what I think are the 5 guiding principles. The one question that I think you can ask yourself in your organization to see whether or not your organization or your team, if that's your sphere of influence, is making the right move is how we measure things. Are we still focused on those output measures? Are we measuring the work that people are doing? And I think this was covered brilliantly on one of the talks earlier today. Are we focusing on busy work and outputs, or actually focusing on measuring the things that our customers care about? Are we now measuring outcomes? And when it comes to moving from project to product, I think we can sum this up in one slide. I think it really is, at its highest level, super simple. If you want to move from project to product, align your people to deliver the things that your customers value, and you won't go far wrong. Thank you very much. I think we might have time for a couple of questions.
Wonderful. Ed, thank you so much for that amazing talk. It's been really wonderful to hear about your views on this. We do have one question from the chat, which I was wondering if you could just touch upon. In cross-functional teams, how do you align with hierarchical hierarchical roles and organizational structure.
Nice one.
Yeah, thank you. It's really hard, and I don't think there's an easy way around that. And lots of organisations that I've worked in have really struggled with this, but I think it can be done. But matrix management is always a challenge, because we want our line management to be really close to the work that people are doing. I'm not afraid I don't have a really great answer for that. But if anybody has any kind of easy answers, I would love to hear them.